Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Parent Advocacy During Unprecedented Times. Michigan Alliance for Families assists parents in understanding their special education rights, communicating their children's needs, and finding information to help their children develop and learn. We offer resources and information for families of children and young adults from birth to age 26 who receive or might be eligible to receive special education services. We do have up-to-date COVID-19 specific pages on our website, michiganallianceforfamilies.org. There you can find executive orders, guidance documents from Michigan Department of Education, and more. Links to all of the resources we're going to talk about today are available there as a handout. The work of Michigan Alliance for Families is done on a regional basis. No matter where you are in Michigan, you can connect with the parent mentor who is knowledgeable about state and local resources and can assist you in navigating the educational system and finding answers to your questions. All of our staff at Michigan Alliance for Families are parents or close family members of an individual with a disability who has firsthand experience with the special education system. We are all facing difficult decisions as we prepare for the return to school. Today's webinar is the second in a series of 3 return to school conversations with Michigan Alliance for Families parent mentors. Hopefully we can give you some guidance and things to consider as you decide what returning to school looks like for your child. Let me introduce you to today's presenters. First, we have Joyce Deerhamer. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. I am Joyce Deerhamer, and I am the Regional Parent Mentor for St. Clair and Lapeer County. I've been a parent mentor for about 4 years. I live in southern St. Clair County and have 2 children, a son who is 20 and is off to college, and my daughter who is 16 who was born with Down syndrome. She spends half of her day included in the general ed curriculum and has an IEP to help support her. I enjoy sharing my experiences with parents to help them support and advocate for their kids.
Thank you, Joyce. We also have Bethan Robbins joining us.
Hi, I'm Bethan Robbins, Regional Parent Mentor for the Greater Kalamazoo area, serving Allegan, Kalamazoo, and St. Joseph counties. I have 2 sons, the youngest having severe multiple disabilities. My oldest gifted me with 2 grandchildren, and one of them is on the autism spectrum. It was a steep learning curve becoming knowledgeable on how to advocate for the educational needs of my medically fragile son, and then my grandson, who has been successful in school after a lot of team effort and a solid behavior intervention plan. I've been privileged to share my experience with other parents for the past 5 years, connecting with and guiding them in ways usually only other parents can.
Thank you, Bethan. And we also have Victoria Martinez with us today.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria Martinez. I'm one of 3 regional parent mentors in Wayne County. I cover southern Wayne County, which is the Downriver area, and it also includes Dearborn and Dearborn Heights. I joined Michigan Alliance for Families in October of 2019. Michigan Alliance for Families has really given me an opportunity to connect and support families who are experiencing issues with education or have questions about special education and what the process looks like. I'm a parent of 2 children, my son who is 7 and my daughter who is 10. My daughter was diagnosed with Down syndrome before she was born and started receiving special education services at 3 months of age. She had her first individual family service plan at 3 months old until her 3rd birthday. Then she went into Head Start and preschool and has had an IEP or individual education plan ever since. She receives modifications to the gen ed academic curriculum, and she receives accommodations in her classes like art, gym, music, and things like that. Thank you for having me today.
Ladies, thank you for joining us and sharing a little bit about yourself. That brings us to today's webinar topic, Parent Advocacy During Unprecedented Times. Today we'll discuss advocating for your child's distance learning needs, documenting events and conversations as they occur, and understanding when to respond and what to do when something isn't working. We'll be discussing questions that parents have on their minds and hear from these parent mentors to learn how they are navigating this process. Ladies, let's turn on our cameras. Perfect. All right. Ladies, what advice do you have to help parents advocate for their child with disabilities during these unprecedented times?
Well, I think we can all agree on that everything is so different this year. Things seem to be changing daily, but through it all, we must still be our child's best advocate. That is the one thing that remains the same. As we are advocating through distance learning, during distance learning, not much is different than advocating for in-person learning. So here are just some tips to keep in mind as you are advocating for your child during these times. Remember, you, the parent, are an equal member of the IEP team. It's very often parents don't feel like members of the IEP team or even players. It's important now than ever to utilize your advocacy skills. Parent knowledge and opinions are very valuable input. No one else knows what you do about your child, what they like, what they don't like, what motivates them, what they are discouraged by, what their strengths are, and where they struggle, and ideas on how to address those struggles. Those are all very valuable tips for your IEP team. And this is especially true with what the knowledge you've gained over the shutdown period. Also, I would suggest to make an effort to communicate clearly. What are your concerns with going back to school? And do you know who the right people are you should communicate that with? Learn about the right technology or assistive technology that might be helpful for your child. Get comfortable using the word access. That is a word that will help you reframe what your child is going to be needing in these new learning opportunities. Think about what it will take your child to access this service or activity. Also, know your rights and responsibilities. The Michigan Department of Education Office of Special Education requires districts to provide special education and related services to students with individual education programs, IEPs, regardless of the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic and public health emergency. The Michigan Department of Education created a guidance document for schools to ensure those rights are protected during COVID-19. A link to this document will be included in our handout of resources. It's a very large document, but it does it's very comprehensive about all the rights that are being still protected during the COVID-19 times.
Yeah, and this document is another easy to reference resource on parent advocacy that will be useful well after our presentation is over.
Yeah, and this is one of my favorite ones. It's a front and a back, but it's super easy to read, and it pretty much encompasses our whole presentation today on one sheet of paper. It's very user-friendly, and I would suggest, if nothing else, I know we're going to give you a lot of information today, but pull this one out because it's really easy to digest.
Thank you, ladies. What kind of things should parents be prepared to discuss?
First thing I always suggest to parents is to review and familiarize yourself with the last IEP that was created during the shutdown. We'll get to data collection in a minute, but just because you use that information that you collected from supervising your child during distance learning in the spring. But I also put together this brief list that you should think about when you are developing your conversational ideas as to what to talk to the team about. Help your child's look better as they are going back to school in the fall. Think about, what did your child's usual day look like? What did they prefer? Did they prefer spending the whole day outside, working on a computer, playing video games? What were some strengths or special interests you noticed? It might be beneficial to share positive qualities with your child's team. What were some of the struggles that you dealt with at home? And include what you found to be most and least helpful in dealing with those struggles. Also, strategies that worked best for your child. Did they work really well with iPad reward time, taking up frequent breaks, or focusing on interest areas? Those are all things you want to just have in your mind as you're preparing what you're going to bring to the team to discuss. Another idea would be to think about what didn't work. What sticks out as being the least helpful? What just didn't work? Trying to do work before breakfast or giving them a pile of paperwork. Also, information that's important for them to know, such as a change in diet or medications, sensory issues, things like that that might impact your child's learning. Also, think about discussing how your child communicates best. How do they communicate? Are they using an augmentative device such as an iPad, sign language, gestures? If nothing worked, discuss what you think might have been helpful. Are there things that your child is anxious or worried about when returning to school? Make sure you bring that up to the IEP team so that they are better prepared to work with your child.
Yeah, I agree, Joyce. Bringing those needs that you found and realized during distance learning are a huge thing to bring to the team so that they can better support your student in whatever programming they're going to receive this fall.
Another thing to be aware of is the option for recovery services to address foregone learning from the early pandemic months. For more information, you can find the link for michigan.gov on our list of resources.
This is also a topic that's covered in one of our videos that we have on our Michigan Alliance for Families website called Return to School Considerations, and it goes into great detail about this. So you should check it out as well.
Yeah, this is a topic that is worthy of its own webinar for sure.
Definitely.
Thank you, ladies. Will your family be doing virtual learning or in-person learning, and what should parents expect?
I think I'd like to remind parents to give themselves some grace. Be patient with yourself and school personnel. This is complicated for everyone. Be open and communicate your child's needs with the team. Keep in mind how our child's goals will be addressed will most likely change this year if they are going to be doing distance learning. Talk with your child about what they need and make sure that they understand that their day might look different from some of their friends. Some kids might be at school, some might be doing distance learning. Our family will be doing remote learning. We discussed it with our daughter. She is 16, and we asked her what she was most comfortable with. She did okay with distance learning in the spring, but I'm going to be meeting with her team and plan to make it better for her this fall. But remember, every child is different.
Yeah, for sure. I think that sitting down and deciding as a family, as a team, is what's best. We decided to use T-charts for each option. And on one side of the T-chart, we had pros, and on the other side, we had cons. And we just looked at all three, the virtual, the distance remote with going back to school, and the in-person learning 100%. And we decided also that virtual was going to be the best option for us because my daughter has a lot of underlying health concerns that we were fearful with her cognitive impairment that she would not keep her mask on or put her hands in her mouth and do things that would put her at a higher risk. So just try to remember that no one option is going to be perfect. And you have to do what works best for your family at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Parents need to be aware of the differences between the options presented by their school district. Tune into any virtual or online presentations by your district discussing current plans. Most plans are written to match the phases laid out in the Return to School roadmap. We encourage you to read the plans for other phases as well, so you know what to expect, if or when the phase changes.
Across Michigan, the term virtual and distance learning is being used interchangeably. So I think that's something that parents need to be careful with too. I advise everyone to ask for clarification of which options are offered and what that means. Some districts are calling the remote or virtual learning something different. They could be saying virtual and they mean that you might potentially be going back to school because it's just for a short period of time until the phases change. So the best thing to do is read through the communications that you're getting from the school. And if you have any questions, ask for clarifications from your teacher or your school district.
Right, and another thing pertaining to this is that sometimes there are schools that are offering distance and virtual learning, but they might be taught by a different organization other than their local school district. So I want to caution parents, just make sure you know all of the information before you make that choice.
Definitely.
Thank you, ladies. Parents may have concerns about how their child can be successful with distance learning. What tips do you have?
Well, remember that remote learning is not for every family. It just isn't. Some kids will do great and some kids won't. If your child is going to be doing distance learning, here's a great resource that I came across with some guides to help offer some ideas to help make it more successful. So the first one they talk about is modeling behavior. And I know that sounds kind of simple, but just showing your child how to do something first will help them learn a new skill, especially if they're a visual learner. Giving clear directions, and that's different for every child. When my daughter was young, I gave her picture lists or picture directions, and now that she's older, I give them to her written, but very simply, so that it doesn't overwhelm her. Support your child the best way that they need it, and every child needs support differently. That might include talking about the task before they do it, or just being close by while they're working on something so that they know you're there in case you need them. Help your child stay on task by helping them establish routines and schedules to help ensure success. Also, give them specific feedback, that such as saying, I like how you sounded that word out, or I like how you did that without me asking you, instead of saying, you're so smart. Lastly, help your child develop some goals. You can help them by inviting their feedback on things that they might want to work on, and they will feel most proud when they work on a goal that they helped create. And this will also be on our list of resources, of course.
When advocating for your child, it's super important to keep all of your IEP files and other documentation organized. How do you guys keep everything organized?
Well, one thing that I did was I created a folder that I have different tabs for each part of her education. One part is communication, and that holds like if I got an email from the school or if they sent me a letter, that is in there. I also keep her tests in a separate tab, progress in another tab. I have one for all the individual education program forms. I have a separate one for behavior, one for medical information that is pertinent to the school, and then I have one for sample work and awards. People don't have to choose a binder. They can choose a different system. Some people use accordion file folders just to hold it all in one place. Some people get the boxes that they have for file folders and put a different file folder for every tab that are different colors. The system that you use is really flexible, but the important part is having something that keeps everything organized in some sort of system.
Yeah, absolutely. I also have binders for my daughter, lots of them. I even went as far as having all green binders so that they're even color coded. But I want to remind parents also to have a digital record of emails in a folder. So what I did was I created a folder in my email account with my daughter's name, and every piece of electronic communication that I get pertaining to her goes right in there. And that way it doesn't get lost in all my other emails or accidentally deleted.
Definitely.
You could Google IEP organization methods, but we have included this link and the binder method in your resources list.
How do you know what documentation you need to keep?
So I keep record of every phone call, every email, like we said, any chats that we have, I jot them down. My child's teacher uses Remind, and some of them use Class Dojo. I keep record of those conversations, and I make sure that any paperwork that they send me is added to my binder as well. I also keep progress of the IEP goals on my own, so that if something is lagging in the progress area, I make sure to email the team and say, hey, you guys, we need to meet and see if we can take a different approach to this goal because she's not doing as well as she should be or as well as I think she can. And that helps me to do my part to keep data in order. In March, we also created a helpful tool that you can that can help you remember what to document for yourself.
Thank you, Victoria. Why is documentation so important, and how do you stay on top of the communications that you're getting from the school?
The school, it's their job to document everything. So if you have documentation and records for yourself and they're organized and easy to access, it helps you participate more collaboratively. Because if you're just going to have, say, a grocery bag or something where it's like this huge pile, you're less likely to go and look for what you need to be able to say, hey, I know this isn't right, or whatever the case is. So if it's all organized and easy to access, you can flip right to it and say, this day, this time, we talked, and it's really important.
Right. That organizational system that you choose helps you be a better advocate for sure. It helps us remember what was intended, because sometimes there's a lot going on in our lives, especially with all these added stresses. We can't possibly remember everything.
And if there's ever a situation where you feel the school hasn't done their part, you'll have the documents to support your line of reasoning and better communicate this to the team to find a solution.
Right.
If it's not in writing, it didn't happen.
Yeah, that's so true. I tell parents all the time when I hear them say, well, I talked to them about it a couple months ago, or she said, I always remind them that if they have to begin the dispute resolution process, which we'll talk about further in a little while, conversations are merely hearsay.
Absolutely. I always stress to parents, whenever you have a conversation in person or by phone, send a follow-up email to summarize what they understood to be said. And then that way it just automatically creates a paper trail, written documentation, and also can clear up any misunderstandings if the person they spoke with replies with, no, that's not what I meant, or that's not what I intended, and it can clear up any miscommunications in the future.
Agreed.
As schools closed for COVID-19 in the spring, parents were left in charge of IEP progress and distance learning. What did you do to keep those things in order?
I really gathered information from my child's progress from my binder that I already had, and then I sat down and thought about what I wanted to accomplish with distance learning. I sat down and wrote out a plan with those things that I thought about and how I would accomplish those goals. For every parent, that might be different. Some children might need to learn the platforms and how to work them, how to turn them on. Also, some parents and children might need to work on appropriate behavior during Zoom meetings. Some children are just ready for that and they can focus on academic content. The important thing is making a plan that's relevant to your child and appropriate, because if the child can't sit through the meeting without getting distracted or making a joke to try to make people laugh and get their attention, you want to get their stamina built up so that they're able to be successful in the virtual platform. After I got all that situated, I acted on my plan and recorded the data that I found and what we worked on. I understand that it sounds like it's really overwhelming, but once you take it one step at a time, it gets a lot easier.
And I was far less formal with keeping my information in order. But again, my daughter is older, so we've have in high school, so it's a little bit different of an environment. I simply had a file folder for her that I kept everything in, everything that she worked on, anything that I printed or any random notes I wrote myself. I just stuck it all in there in no particular order because I knew it was going to be there and I could find it all if I needed to refer to it in the future. But we also had a really big wall whiteboard calendar that we wrote on, and I could write down what our schedule was and what she was going to be working on. But then it was super easy to erase and add to it as we went, keeping some mode of flexibility in place.
We have a great page on our website that talks about documentation, and it has a video around this topic. I encourage everyone to check that out.
How might parents document and use what they learned during the spring of 2020 when we were doing distance learning to help advocate for the new needs of their child?
What I did was I took all the documentation that I had and all the data that I collected with the things that I noticed, and I used that to create a list of needs for virtual learning in the coming fall. And then I talked to the team and I said, we need to have a meeting to discuss how we're going to address these newly found needs with virtual learning.
Yeah, my daughter doesn't have direct speech services. So when I first noticed her interacting online, she was not interacting very easily, and she was very shy and had her head down. And so I asked the speech therapist at her school to help work with her one-on-one to help her become more comfortable using her voice in interactive online platforms. So that was something that was a new need. But in addition to that, we also have things like assistive technology that might help. But I always like to remind parents, technology doesn't always mean high-tech devices like iPads. I implemented the use of a low-tech assistive technology by creating these little communication cards for my daughter that helped her communicate closed-end questions with a group, because often when she was in a bigger group, she was shy with talking out loud and nervous that her voice wouldn't be heard or understood. So just having a little piece of paper helped her be able to communicate better with the group.
Yeah, when I was working with my daughter, I noticed how disengaged she was with the Zoom meetings. She would make gestures like, oh. And I implemented some positive behavior supports, and we're going to have this positive behavior intervention and support webinar that we partnered with Michigan Multi-Tier Systems of Support. And you can register for it on our website under the events tab, like Emily mentioned earlier.
Yeah, the first.
Yeah, I caught it yesterday. And oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Joyce. I think we were both saying the same thing.
I caught it yesterday, and it was really, really good information. And I believe these are being recorded so that you can go back and watch them again if you did miss it.
Yep, that's what I was going to say. These will also be available on our website and our YouTube channel. I thought yesterday was great. There were a lot of like concrete examples for families to follow.
Yes.
A solid relationship with school staff is essential to building a strong IEP team. How do you create this type of relationship?
It helps to start early. Introduce yourself and your child to the individual teachers and other staff that might have contact with your child. Providing a snapshot of your child will give staff an overview of your child's strengths and needed supports. Keep communication concise. Cultivate good relationships with staff by remaining calm and patient and clear. Though this is a difficult thing to do in usual circumstances, it's even more important as we find our way through changes caused by COVID-19. This way, when there are concerns, staff will be less likely to become defensive or avoidant. Understand they too are under pressure to keep all children and themselves safe while educating your student.
Most
True.
definitely. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Most definitely. I feel that starting positive and remembering the end goal is the success of the child is what the entire team is meeting for. And keeping that in mind always helps me keep my emotions and my negative thoughts at bay. I always try to bring my daughter with us. And if it is impossible to bring her with us because she's in class or she just can't be there that day, I try to bring a picture of her so that we all keep our personal feelings and egos in check by remembering it's all about her and her success.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And, you know, my mom always told me you attract more flies with honey than vinegar. So I always suggest parents try to reach out in a positive, constructive manner. It really does help maintain those relationships with the team.
Yeah, and another great idea, if you don't have a picture that's current, you can always create a snapshot like the one that's on the screen right now. And you can pass it out to every staff member that sees your student, from the principal to the maintenance staff. It's really important because sometimes when there's students with behaviors, people just kind of write them off sometimes, right? So if they see this, they will get to connect with your student on a more personal level and know how to motivate them in those situations. And this example is from our first webinar in our return to school conversations. You can find a recording of that presentation on our website, sorry.
I wanted to add, I always thought this was kind of like for younger kids, but I actually did do one for my daughter in high school. And especially since she is in the general ed classes more often than not, and they are not, unfortunately, very familiar with having a student with Down syndrome in their classes. So I created one, and I tell you, her teacher consultant told me she wishes every parent did one of these for their children. It was that helpful.
Yeah, and I don't think that every staff member looks at the IEPs either. So if they have this,
Right.
they are better equipped to work with your child.
Right, and less intimidated, I think, if they don't know what they're getting into.
Yeah.
My daughter has really limited communication skills, and the part there that talks about your child's interests, everybody knows something about, Paw Patrol to be able to have a conversation with the little kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If there are concerns or a parent feels that something isn't right, how can they address this in a positive manner?
Well, the first thing you want to do is email your child's teacher with your concerns. Email gives the teacher flexibility and response time, allows you to calm your emotions if you've been upset. That's important, and automatically keeps a record of communication. And you don't have to struggle with who said what when. If the teacher doesn't respond in a timely or constructive manner, you go to the next rung on the ladder. There are many ways of resolving problems or disagreements, but to keep them from escalating, always make your way from the beginning as calm and clear as you can be.
Right. So you always start with your teacher, and if that isn't successful, then look at the ladder and it shows you the order in which you should, the general hierarchy. So for informal dispute resolutions.
Yeah, informal is the first step in the resolution process, and the process of resolving special education issues always starts with those informal conversations and meetings or emails. As Beth and Joyce said, if those are unsuccessful, it is best to follow these tips and request, go to number 2 and request an IEP meeting to revise and amend the IEP accordingly.
Another step in the dispute resolution process is facilitation and mediation. We partner with special education mediation services, and you can find their information in our resources tab as well.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows, special education mediation services are doing mediations and facilitations virtually. So don't hesitate to contact them if your school is doing everything virtually. That's not an issue with them. They're able to do mediations and facilitations throughout the whole shutdown virtually.
Yeah, I agree. They're a great resource. The next step and the last resort in the dispute resolution process would be to file a state complaint or a due process complaint. Once the due process is filed, though, the power of the decision is out of the hands of the team, and it goes to become the decision of the administrative law judge, who hasn't necessarily been a part of the process, is unfamiliar with their child and the situation, and then this takes the decision making away from the team.
Thank you, ladies. Excellent points to keep in mind. Many families have different levels of stress with multiple situations happening all at once. How can parents keep the school informed so they can better understand the family's needs?
Well, just as it is important to remember that teachers and staff may be struggling under these new and stressful conditions, it's also important to understand that they may not have answers to all of your questions, especially when these questions might range outside of the professional knowledge, such as financial, food, housing, or mental health assistance. If you and your family are experiencing hardship outside of the educational setting, seek information and potential assistance about potential assistance programs through calling 211 or your local chapter of the ARC or Disability Network. It might be appropriate to seek services through local community mental health or Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Let them know what your situation is and ask for guidance. Your regional parent mentor may also know about local resources that can help you get feeling better balanced and more capable of adding your strength and voice to your child's IEP team.
Thank you, Bethan. Ladies, any last pieces of advice or thoughts?
Yeah, I think the most important piece for me is keeping that trying to keep that relationship intact between the team and yourself, because that's the most important aspect of the team. I encourage collaboration and open-mindedness, as well as keeping calm, because when the process isn't going well, it can be upsetting and frustrating. But if you have a good relationship with your team, you can feel less stressed and try to remember that they have the best interest of your child at heart when they're addressing your concerns. And also remember that if that doesn't work and things can't be resolved collaboratively, that regardless of the pandemic, you still have procedural safeguards to protect your rights.
For sure. This is another tip sheet I came across. I like little tip sheets in case you haven't noticed. But this one talks about things such as keeping in mind that you are the parent, not the teacher. And distance learning might not be a choice made. Just do the best that you can. Be flexible in your response to your child's needs. Remember, it does take a lot longer to present topics to 30 students in a classroom than it does for one student to learn something online. So don't expect that your child will be learning at home for 6 or more hours that they are typically in school. But also, I like to remind parents to look for opportunities to incorporate learning at home. In our home, we've been doing a lot more cooking and baking together. And just doing something like that is a great way to reinforce skills such as math, sequencing, reading, and patience. And of course, this PACER-centered document will be on our resource handout.
With so much uncertainty and strong emotions, it's easy to forget we're not alone. Together, we can help families and find their best solutions. Parents, remember to reach out to your regional parent mentor to get started. This map is on our website with a list of mentors who cover each region statewide.
Yep, and one more thing to add is that MDE, Michigan Department of Education, also has an information line that's beneficial, and you can call them anytime to ask for clarification on any special education issue that they might have.
Yeah, I agree. Those are great resources, but I always suggest contacting Michigan Alliance for Families first to get advice on where to start, because everyone's case is so individual and requires different measures.
Absolutely. Uh-oh. We can't hear you, Emily.
Okay, ladies, we do have a little bit of time to go through some of these questions that have been submitted. If we don't get to your question today, it might be real specific to your child, or if we run out of time, you can follow up with us at info@michiganallianceforfamilies.org or consult the map and contact your parent mentor directly. Joyce, what are some examples, Joyce or anybody else, sorry. What are some examples of strategies and tools you use to increase engagement with online learning? I know you had shared the CEDAR document and then the PACER document.
I think it would depend on what the issue is with the online learning. The example I shared was with my daughter was just very shy about engaging. So some of the things, in addition to the speech therapist, I had some of her favorite people that we lined up to doing video chat calls so she could get more comfortable with that. Also, one thing I learned through observing her was that she liked to doodle while she was listening to the content that the teacher was giving. And my gut instinct was that she shouldn't be doodling while the teacher was talking, but she really was absorbing that information. And I saw that she was able to answer the questions pertaining to the story that she was listening to while she was doodling. So sometimes, you know, you have to just kind of let your child dictate what works best for them, even if you think that wouldn't be a good idea.
Yeah, when we set up our learn at home area in the house, one of my sons sat on a yoga ball instead of a regular chair. And they have some little things that they fidget with, you know, off screen. I could be fidgeting with one right now and you wouldn't necessarily know. But just because you're doing that, as Joy says, you know, you can still be really engaged, and just having a sensory need met at the same time.
I agree with that. With my daughter's disengagement and the yawning and acting really like she wasn't interested, I used the school's advice as far as PBIS. In her school, they would have a party every Friday for good behavior. So I found something, she really likes a certain cartoon, and I would say, okay, if you get through this video, fully paying attention, and I can verify, like asking you questions to make sure that you were paying attention, you can have 20 minutes of your favorite show, uninterrupted, no chores, no me calling your name, anything. And that really helped her too.
Thank you. We had a question about where in IDEA or MARS, the Michigan Administrative Rules for Special Education, do you find information about contingency learning plans? And, you know, this was unexpected, and there's nothing in either of those documents at this time that address contingency learning plans. Victoria, you had said earlier that parents still have all their procedural safeguards.
Yeah, that's so true. Our children still have the same rights under IDEA and MARS, and those protections didn't go anywhere just because of this pandemic. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I think the easiest place to get information about that is the Michigan Alliance for Families website. It's really user-friendly, and it has a COVID-19 tab right at the top. In there, you can learn about contingency learning plans, and those are not required, but strongly suggested, and some districts are doing them and some are not. Ours are not, but when I asked them about it, they said they were essentially going through the motions of the steps in a contingency learning plan, not doing a formal learning plan.
There's other guidance there too from MDE, Michigan Department of Ed, on all of their guidance to the schools regarding those contingency learning plans. So being knowledgeable about those are really good as well.
Yeah, and you know, there's more guidance coming out. So some of these questions that folks have asked, we're still waiting for more guidance from the state so we can share these answers with you.
Right.
We had a couple questions about redirecting their students and managing behavior during learning at home. And I would refer those people who have questions about behavior supports to that webinar that Victoria had, that webinar series that Victoria had mentioned earlier in partnership with the multi-tiered system of supports program. They're coming up on, there was one yesterday, and then coming up again on September 2nd and I believe September 16th. And again, those will be recorded. Lots of really useful examples and information how you can go from modeling and practice to where it just becomes a routine part of what the families are doing at home.
Yeah, I think it offered a lot of really simple, easy to implement tips, and something as simple as, you know, the whole concept of the positive behavior support system, you know, catching your child doing something good as opposed to calling them out on doing something bad all the time. Sometimes parents just need a reminder on that.
Yeah, we had a couple questions that have to do with the evaluation process. And we do have information on our site about what evaluation looks like. If evaluations can be completed virtually, that's great. And you can get through that process and then get to the point where you're either adding it to the IEP or you're going to, you know, decide an eligibility. But if evaluations can't be completed virtually, the team it's suggested that the team go ahead and develop that contingency learning plan for those students, giving what we assume would be their eligibility, giving what we assume or what we know so far about what their needs are. You do not have to wait until everything's back to normal for those steps to still happen.
Right.
I think hearing that will put a lot of parents at a calmer state, because when I asked for assistive technology for my daughter because of virtual learning, I said, I don't have any devices here that will help her read books that we already have. We need help. And they were like, well, usually we have to do an assistive technology evaluation. And that was before the guidance came out. It was right before, it was like the week it happened. So it was right before the guidance about the contingency learning plans came out. So that was really helpful to put my mind at ease for sure.
We did have a couple questions about the student profile template, and we have a link to that from last week's webinar. We kind of went more in depth on that topic, but it is on our website, and I'll make sure I share the link to that on our Facebook page later today. Or you can email us at info@michiganallianceforfamilies.org, and I'll get that sent to you. Ladies, that is all of our time that we have for today. So I thank you so much for being on and presenting this information for us today.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
We are recording all 3 of our Return to School webinar, our Return to School conversation webinars, and they'll be available on our website and YouTube channel. Next week, join us for tips for student self-advocates. Michigan Alliance for Families is an IDEA grant-funded initiative of the Michigan Department of Education, Office of Special Education, and Michigan's Federal Parent Training and Information Center, funded by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. Follow-up questions can be directed to us at info@michiganallianceforfamilies.org or by calling 1-800-552-4821. Thank you and have a great day.